Have you ever opened your banking app and just stared at the number? Not because it was impressive, but because it wasn't. Maybe you've done the math in your head before. If I save this much each month, if I invest this consistently, maybe one day I'll hit six figures. $100,000. It sounds like a clean number, a milestone, something adults are supposed to reach quietly. But right now, it feels far away. And if you're honest, part of you wonders, would it even change anything? Would you feel different, safer, smarter, or would you just move the goalpost again? Here's what most people don't realize. The first $100,000 isn't just a financial milestone, it's a psychological one. And the reason it changes how you think has almost nothing to do with the number itself. It has everything to do with what happens inside your head when survival stops being the main focus. Let me explain. Most people think the first $100,000 is about math. Save aggressively, invest consistently, let compound interest do its thing. And yes, technically, that's true. But that's not why it matters. The real story starts much earlier. It starts when you're living paycheck to paycheck, when your rent leaves your account and you immediately calculate what's left, when groceries feel heavier than they should, when an unexpected car repair doesn't just inconvenience you, it unsettles you. That stage of life is about reaction. You react to bills, you react to emergencies, you react to market swings, you react to your boss's mood because your income depends on it. When money is tight, your brain narrows. Psychologists call it scarcity mindset. Your mental bandwidth shrinks. You think short-term because you have to, not because you're irresponsible, not because you lack discipline, but because your nervous system prioritizes immediate threats. If rent is due, you're not thinking about index funds. If your account balance is low, you're not calmly analyzing long-term returns. You're thinking about Friday. You're thinking about this month. You're thinking about survival. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most financial advice ignores that stage. It tells you to optimize when you're still stabilizing. It talks about asset allocation when you're just trying to breathe. So when people hear, your first $100,000 is the hardest, they assume it's about the math. It's not. It's hard because you're fighting your own psychology the entire time. Every dollar you save feels like something you're giving up today. Every investment feels slightly risky because you don't have much margin for error. When your net worth is low, volatility feels personal. A market dip doesn't look like a normal fluctuation. It looks like a setback you can't afford. Now, imagine something shift, not overnight, not dramatically, but slowly. Your emergency fund grows, your investments accumulate. You check your account, and instead of feeling tightness in your chest, you feel space. Maybe you've hit $20,000, then $50,000, then $80,000, and eventually, one day, you cross six figures, $100,000. The number itself is arbitrary. In some cities, it doesn't even buy a small apartment. In others, it's a life-changing sum. But the real change isn't external, it's internal. Because something subtle happens when your assets begin to generate noticeable growth on their own. Let's say you've invested that $100,000 in a broad market fund. Historically, markets have returned around 7–10% annually over long periods. Some years more, some years less. But let's just use 7%. For simplicity, 7% of $100,000 is $7,000. That's not theoretical. That's growth that can happen without you working extra hours, without you negotiating a raise, without you starting a side hustle. For the first time, your money starts contributing in a way that feels tangible. When your portfolio was $5,000, a 7% gain was $350. Nice, but barely noticeable. At $10,000, it's $700. At $20,000, it's $1,400. You see the pattern, but at $100,000, something clicks. The gains start looking like actual income, real money, enough to cover rent for a couple of months, enough to fund a vacation, enough to make you pause and think, wait, this is different. You start to realize that wealth isn't just about what you earn, it's about what you own. And that realization changes your behavior in quiet but powerful ways. When you don't have much saved, your identity is tied to your paycheck. Your job feels like your lifeline. If your boss calls you into a meeting, your heart rate spikes a little. If your company announces layoffs, your sleep gets lighter. But when you've built a cushion, when you've crossed that six-figure mark, you don't necessarily quit your job or become fearless. You just feel less fragile. Fragility is the right word. Before, one mistake could derail you. One emergency could wipe out months of progress. One market dip could feel catastrophic. After, you start thinking in decades instead of months. And that shift in time horizon is everything. When you think in months, you optimize for comfort and security. You avoid risk. You delay investing because Now isn't a good time. You hesitate to negotiate your salary because you don't want to rock the boat. When you think in decades, you optimize for growth. You tolerate volatility because you understand it's part of the process. You see downturns as temporary instead of permanent. You're less reactive. The first $100,000 doesn't make you rich. It makes you patient. And patience, financially speaking, is a superpower. Let's talk about something else that changes. Your relationship with consumption. When your net worth is low, spending feels emotional. A dinner out isn't just a meal. It's either guilt or relief. A new gadget isn't just a purchase. It's either proof you're progressing or evidence you're falling behind. But as your assets grow, something interesting happens. Spending loses some of its emotional charge, not because you suddenly stop caring, but because you're no longer using purchases to compensate for financial anxiety. You don't need to prove you're doing okay. You are doing okay. That's subtle, but it's profound. You also start to see trade-offs more clearly. Before, the choice might have been, do I buy this now or wait until next month? After, the question becomes, do I want this item or do I want this money compounding for another 10 years? When you've watched your investments grow from $40,000 to $100,000, you've witnessed compounding firsthand. It's no longer a concept from a finance book. It's something you've experienced, and experience changes belief. You stop asking, does this really work? You start asking, how can I stay consistent? That's the turning point. The first $100,000 shifts you from doubt to trust. Not blind trust, not reckless optimism. Earned trust. You've seen markets drop and recover. You've seen your own discipline pay off. You've watched small monthly contributions stack into something meaningful. And once you trust the process, you stop obsessing over every fluctuation. This is where most people misunderstand wealth. They think rich people are less stressed because they have more money. Sometimes that's true, but often, they're less stressed because they've internalized long-term thinking. They don't interpret every setback as a threat. They don't make every decision through the lens of scarcity. The first $100,000 is often the moment that internalization begins. It's the first time your financial life feels less like a treadmill and more like a flywheel. A treadmill requires constant effort just to stay in place. Stop running, and you fall off. A flywheel is heavy at first, hard to push, frustratingly slow, but once it gains momentum, it starts helping you. That's compounding. That's investing. That's consistency. And psychologically, it feels completely different. There's another shift that doesn't get talked about enough. Agency. When you're early in your financial journey, it's easy to feel like the system is happening to you. Inflation rises, rent increases, interest rates change, the market dips, your company restructures. You feel small in a big machine. But when you've built meaningful assets, you start to feel like a participant instead of just a passenger. You understand how markets work. You understand how time amplifies money. You understand that your decisions, however boring, matter. That sense of agency reduces anxiety more than the number itself. It's not that $100,000 solves your problems. It's that it proves you can build something durable. Now, let's be honest. Reaching $100,000 doesn't automatically transform your personality. It doesn't erase insecurity. It doesn't guarantee financial freedom. In high-cost cities, it might not even feel like much. And if you compare yourself to someone with $1 million, it can suddenly seem small. That's why comparison is dangerous at every level. The power of the first $100,000 isn't in the comparison. It's in the trajectory. It's proof that you moved from zero to something substantial, from fragility to resilience, from reacting to planning. And that trajectory builds confidence in a way that no motivational speech ever could. So how do you approach this milestone without turning it into an obsession? First, you stop romanticizing the number. It's not magic. It's math and behavior over time. Second, you focus less on the total and more on the systems. If you automate your investments, if you live slightly below your means, if you avoid lifestyle inflation every time you get a raise, if you protect your downside with an emergency fund, then whether it takes 5 years or 10, you'll get there. And along the way, your thinking will start shifting before you even notice. You'll start calculating purchases in opportunity cost. You'll start evaluating jobs not just on salary, but on flexibility and growth. You'll start asking bigger questions. What would I do if money wasn't urgent? Where would I live if I wasn't optimizing for survival? How much is enough for me? Those questions don't usually appear when your account balance is close to zero. They appear when you have breathing room. And breathing room is what the first $100,000 often represents. Not luxury, not extravagance. Breathing room. If you're still far from that number, I want to say something clearly. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not behind in some moral sense. The early phase is slow for almost everyone. It feels invisible. It feels thankless. It feels like effort without reward. But that's because compounding is quiet in the beginning. A seed underground looks like nothing is happening, but roots are forming. The first $100,000 is simply the moment when the growth becomes visible enough to change how you see the future. And if you're already past it, don't dismiss it. Pause for a moment and remember what it took. The discipline, the missed impulses, the months you chose long-term over short-term comfort. That version of you deserves recognition. Because ultimately, the reason your first $100,000 changes how you think is simple. It shifts your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to get ahead. You start seeing yourself as someone who builds. Builders think differently. They tolerate slow progress. They expect setback. They value foundations. And once you see yourself that way, every additional dollar isn't just money. It's reinforcement of who you are becoming. You don't need to rush it. You don't need to compare it. You don't need to broadcast it. Just build quietly, consistently, because one day you'll open your app, you'll see a number with 6 digits, and you might not celebrate wildly. You might not even tell anyone, but internally, something will settle. Not because you've made it, but because you finally understand how it works. And that understanding is what truly changes everything. Progress beats perfection. Always. And if this gave you a little more clarity, a little less anxiety about where you are right now, then stay with me. This channel isn't about getting rich fast. It's about understanding how money actually works and how your psychology shapes every financial decision you make. If you're trying to think longer term, act calmer, and build something that lasts, subscribe and join me here. We're building this step by step. And if this resonated with you, let me know in the comments. Where are you in your journey right now? Not the exact number, just the stage. Surviving? Stabilizing? Building? I read them. And remember, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep going.